term you'll hear a lot of people throw around draft time for any sport really, but particularly in the NHL is safe. And what they're referring to is how safe they think that player is. And what that means basically is a safe pick is a player who doesn't necessarily have super high upside, not necessarily like a superstar or even like a top line forward, but they're somebody who does project pretty well to the NHL, maybe in a bottom six or middle six role, or if they're a defenseman, like a bottom pair, second pair guy. They're not generally going to blow you away, but they will almost certainly play in the NHL and have pretty substantial careers. What I'm going to do today is talk about a few players in the 2022 draft class that I think are pretty safe. Now, I'm actually going to add a bit of a qualifier to this and say that they are safe for their relatively expected draft position. And that'll make a bit more sense when I get into the first player, which is Shane Wright. So you might be thinking, well, Shane Wright, he's going first overall. Like, that's not, how is he a safe pick? Well, it's just that Shane Wright does not blow me away. I don't think he's going to be like a superstar level player like a McDavid or a Matthews or like a McCarr or somebody like that, right? Other players who have gone first overall. I mean, I know McCarr didn't go first overall, but just ignore that part, okay? To me, Wright is a player who does not have the highest upside in this draft class. But the reason why you draft him first overall is because the player he already is now. And to me, there is not a player in this draft class who is better than him right now. When I say Shane Wright is a safe pick, I don't mean that he's not going to be like that impactful or even that good in the NHL. I just mean that he might not have the highest upside, but there's almost no risk with Shane Wright. He is still a first overall player. The odds are he is still going to be a very good NHL player, just not anything crazy. But the odds of him being a complete bust, like for example, like a Nail Yakupov, I don't see that happening with Shane Wright at all. So, I mean, that's pretty rare for first overall picks, anyways. But to me, Wright still does kind of fill that role as a safe pick. Another player I want to talk about is Cutter Gauthier. Now, Gauthier is not a player that really blows me away in any aspect of his game, really. He's a good skater, he's got a good shot, but I don't know how much of his offense is going to really translate to the NHL. So, could he be a top line player under really good circumstances? Maybe. Could he be a solid top six player? That's a little more likely. But the odds of him completely being a bust or like not making the NHL at all, I think are pretty low because he has pretty good fundamentals. So, one of the most important things that I look at in skaters or prospects in general is their skating. And to me, all the tools that Gauthier has combined with his skating really just makes him a pretty safe bet wherever he goes. Now, he might go a bit higher than I would like because I think his upside is a little bit limited, but he's still going to be a safe pick. So if you're a team that really prioritizes getting guys who are almost certainly going to make the NHL over guys that are like a 50-50 chance, but if they make it, they'll be really good, then Gauthier is a guy for you. So the next player I'm going to talk about is Connor Geekie. Now, to me, Geekie is probably the least safe player of any player I'm going to talk about today because his skating is an issue. But I do think his floor is still pretty reasonable. Even safe picks can sometimes not pan out. There's a reason that these guys are called prospects, right? First overall picks don't pan out sometimes. And Geekie certainly isn't going to go first overall, but he is likely going to go in the top half of the first round. And his upside, I don't think is very high at all. It's probably the lowest of any guy I'm going to talk about, in my opinion. But if he just improves his skating a little bit, then his floor, I think his floor now, I should say, is still pretty solid. And the odds are he'll be a little bit above his floor, because in my opinion, his floor is probably like a fourth line grinder energy guy. But I think it's more likely that he becomes a similar role, but as a third liner who can add a little bit more offense. The fourth player on my safe picks list is Marco Casper. Casper, again, not a guy with a ton of upside. Him and Geeky, I think, are a little bit similar. Neither of them have really crazy puck skills. Neither of them are very good skaters. Casper is a better skater than Geeky, though. I will give him that, but he just isn't really going to do anything flashy. And I actually think Casper's upside is perhaps a little bit lower than Geeky's. Or I should say his ceiling is a little bit lower than Geeky's, but he just has really good fundamentals. He's a good net front guy. He can get tips, he can get rebounds, goes to the dirty areas of the ice, has strong positioning, he's strong on his feet, he's strong with his stick. So I do think he'll probably end up becoming like maybe a third line center again, like a grindy type of guy who can give you some energy, score a clutch goal every now and again. But the odds of him completely like not making the NHL at all, I think are again very low, which is why I see him as a safe pick. So there are two more players I am going to talk about, and the first one is Joshlovkowski. And you'll notice something about these players so far. I haven't mentioned it yet, but all these players have size. Now, that varies. Like, they're all over 6 feet, I'm pretty sure. I believe Gauthier might be the shortest. I think he's 6'1". But Geekie is 6'4", Casper I think is 6'2", and Slavkovsky as well, I believe, is listed at 6'4" or maybe 6'5". And he probably has the highest, well, other than Shane Wright, of course. I think he has the highest ceiling of these guys, but his floor is also really safe. He's a pretty good skater, he has a really good shot, and he has size. You combine those things, and your floor is pretty much solid. Like, I don't see this guy not making the NHL at all. I think he'll have a very, very solid career, and he might even turn into a uh, pretty solid first line player in the NHL. So the last guy I want to talk about is David Juracek. Juracek is my favorite defenseman in this draft class, and that is partially because of his. He kind of reminds me a little bit of like a defenseman version of Slavkovsky. He's got the size, he can be physical, he has a good shot, and you combine those things into a defenseman. I mean, having a good shot isn't necessarily like necessary to be an effective defenseman, even an offensive defenseman in the NHL. It certainly helps, but um, just his skating and his size combination alone, just like a lot of these other guys, really makes him a pretty safe bet for me. I think the worst case scenario with Juracek is that he becomes like a second pairing, second power play guy, almost like a kind of like a Sergachev type. And Sergachev is still a very solid, very valuable defenseman that you want on your team, especially if you're going on a deep playoff run. I feel like guys of that nature become more and more valuable the later you get into the playoffs. So they might not necessarily be huge contributors in the regular season, but they're going to give you solid minutes and especially with a guy like Yurchek, I don't see him missing the NHL, or I should say, I don't see him becoming a complete bust. Okay, guys, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you are interested, I will leave another video in the top right hand corner of the screen. Uh, it's a good video, so go ahead and check it out if you haven't already. With that being said, have a nice day.